Welcome at our next episode of Working Wonders Table Talks in the month where we discuss the age of adaptability. And my guests today are Jorissa Neutelings, Head of Digital and Innovation at Vattenfall, and of course Kara Antoine, currently you're President of Women in Tech Netherlands, but you've had a previous role at Microsoft. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to dive into the age of adaptability. Adaptability means a lot of different things. You both have really interesting careers. What is adaptability to you? And maybe, Kara, you can go into it first.
Sure. And what is not adaptability? I think today is even a question because we're in a phase of needing to be agile and needing to transform not only ourselves, but thinking about the environments that we work and live in. And for the first time, I'm finding myself in a space which is a not-for-profit space and being much more of an entrepreneur in this space, whereas I think my background has very much been a corporate soldier throughout my career until now. And so that is one element of adaptability, is being able to transform yourself, having had a long history of working in big corporations, and now working in a space which is, for me, significantly different in terms of the approach to business and community. And I think adaptability, quite simply, is being open, being curious, and having a mindset that is willing to change based on your circumstance and based on your environment. And
how do you see change? Because you're now in a non-for-profit space. You've been as you said, a corporate soldier for many years. Being part of a corporation requires you to also play ball, play along. How do you stay adaptable in that space?
You have to be, because either you are on the side of passing the ball or receiving the ball, if to use that analogy. And, the circumstances are always changing around you. People will change, situations will change, the economy and society and what's happening to us will change, expected or unexpected. And so the ability to be agile as an individual and to be able to react to those circumstances is vital for us all. And I think the one most amazing thing that I have witnessed and that we can all observe, I'm sure, in the moment of this pandemic that we're going through together is, in organizations, we've been talking about for the last 5 or maybe even 10 years, the need to transform and to enable our employees with more remote working conditions. And I think these are circumstances where you could ask a team to go and put a strategy together that would take maybe 5 or 6 months to determine what the strategy could be, take another 5 or 6 months to then go and implement that. And we've seen organizations of 30, 50, 100, 200,000 and more people transforming within a week and becoming a very adaptable community of people who work from home now. And, I think if that's not an example of, tremendous adaptability that from organizations big and small have gone through, being able to respond and react to the current circumstances, the current situation, I think that's a really nice example of what adaptability also can mean.
Yeah, and then taking that, what you just said, Kara, to you, Jorissa, because for the last 3 years or so, you've been head of digital and IT at Vattenfall. You are part of one of these larger corporations, but also have a background in being corporate, being an entrepreneur, going back to corporate again. Going into the first bit, the big corporate that had to adapt to current situations, what have the last few months been like for you?
Wow. Well, they have been like crazy. And when I hear Kara talk, I was working on getting people connected to teams where we can co-create quite easily. And nobody wanted to. And within 1 month, everybody was connected. But it was really busy times because as head of IT, I had to make sure that all the people within Vattenfall could be connected from home. And they have different setups. You actually don't know where they work with. And people needed help. People needed education. And to be adaptable, you need also the knowledge to be able to do so. So I founded the Digital Academy like 2 years ago within Vattenfall, but now we really had to run fast to think of even more courses. And I feel...
Because what is the Digital Academy? What does it do?
Well, the Digital Academy is make every person within Vattenfall connected. I found when I came in that digital maturity was challenging because, you know, we had a good running company and there was no need for huge change, but digital was knocking on the door. And I always say you can look at other energy companies, but, you know, our customer has only got one, and hopefully they will stick to ours. But they get acquainted with services from Coolblue, Bol.com, etc., etc. So they are adapting, getting used to new services. So we need to adapt as well. And being able to really look through trends, what is important, how can I change? Mm-hmm. I founded this internal academy where my colleagues teach others. And it's really cool. So I think to be able to adapt, you need to be connected. You need to know what's happening out there, what's happening in other branches. How can you connect to your daily work in that? And I feel sometimes, you said you were an entrepreneur before. As an entrepreneur, I need to be connected because those large companies ask me, like, what do you think will happen, Yorissa? And where should we invest? And now, being in a corporate, I found that people are, they enter the building and they look around and think, okay, this is my work. But do you see what is happening out there? So being adaptable, being agile, being able to connect is very important. And I found an academy has a lower threshold when it's inside. It doesn't cost any money, only a bit of time. And of course, it's now fully digital. Because everybody works from home still. Yeah.
And so how's that been, that working from home? Is the transition been doable? Or did you run into a lot of, you said the first reaction was no, we don't want to. There was a research done a few weeks ago that asked the employees of ABN AMRO if they wanted to go back to working 5 days a week. And only, I believe, 4% said that they were waiting for that moment to go back to the office 5 days a week. And the other 96% said, well, I'm okay with being flexible 2 days, 3 days, having the option to come in, but also the option to stay at home. How has that been for your people?
Yeah, more or less the same. I think that a lot of people, co-workers at our company, at first thought, okay, is this my life? But they gained something new. They gained more time, more attention for kids, being able, although it was really stressful, to teach children and also to work. They learned more about their children. People got more time to do sports, to attend to their own environments, so close to home. And quite recently I did a research amongst a group of people within our company, asking that very same question: how many days would you like to return to the office once it's possible? And I found that most people tend to want to work 3 days at home and 2 days at the office. Then again, when it's 30 plus degrees outside, everybody wants to come to the office because of the air conditioning.
Yeah, of course.
But for now, Vattenfall is, we're taking extra safety measurements. So for us, it's not an idea that you go to the office regularly, only from time to time in a very small group. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Kara, you already said it a little bit in your own introduction. You moved spaces, you adapted in a certain trying out something new or wanting to try out something new just before the pandemic hit. You quit your job at Microsoft. You now are the president of Women in Tech Netherlands, which also means you have a different role. You connect a lot more with tech companies within the community, which is something I think along the lines of what you were already doing within Microsoft. Where do you see the need to adapt in that space?
So I think, in fact, in following along with the line of conversation just now, we're certainly seeing as more and more companies are faced with this dilemma, this decision about return to what we call work. And I think one thing we can probably agree is that work is not a place per se.
Yeah.
You don't go to work, so your work can be anywhere. And it's important to understand that we see now we can trust our employees when they're working from home and working from different locations. And I think there was a lot of speculation of, gosh, how are we going to manage our people when they're not in front of us all the time? And very quickly we could see that we can in fact trust each other. And that was, I think, something that in terms of agility and adaptability that leaders and managers needed to adjust to as well, and letting go of the fear of whether or not they could trust their people in their organization. Yeah. And we've also seen decisions like Vattenfall looking at perhaps a balanced return in terms of when we have the ability to work from different locations, whether it indeed is an office or your home or somewhere else. There are, of course, other strategies that we see. Salesforce, I think, just announced that until August of 2021, they will have a full 100% work-at-home policy. And so you see, some of those leading companies making bold decisions like that. I think we'll see more of that. And I feel that the majority of reaction right now is really looking at a balance. I believe personally that we need the human connection, and human connection meaning also that we do see each other in person. Mm-hmm. I feel that there is a different type of conversation, a different level of engagement happening when we get to see each other in person. And so having a fully off-site virtual world is something that I think is limiting some of our interactions. One thing that I certainly have observed is that in terms of the relationships that people have prior to the pandemic, if you had good relationships prior to the pandemic, probably those relationships could continue to get stronger throughout the pandemic because we're all in something together.
We had empathy. Personal or business relationships, or both?
Both. Business relationships that were strong, personal relationships that were strong, human-to-human relationships, really, that were strong. And those could become stronger as a result of the pandemic because we're going through something together. However, the opposite being that relationships that may have been a bit shaky or were not going very well have not stood a very good chance of improving significantly as a result of the pandemic. People have had to work much harder to get those relationships back on track because, again, I think we miss that personal connection, that in-person physical connection that we have with people.
Of course, I think that's something that we at the Next Women see as one of the biggest challenges as well. I mean, the transition or the translation with knowledge, with coaching, with mentoring, a lot of what we do, that's been manageable. That's been even, I think, maybe even improved by making the decision or having to make the decision by moving everything to online. It saves a lot of time. It saves a lot of energy for a lot of people. So we actually see the demand being higher, but also the engagement being a lot better. But really that networking part, which is also a key to running a community, that's been the biggest challenge, missing out on that interpersonal connection, being able to be in the same room, have a cup of coffee, have a glass of wine and connect. How do you see that at the Women in Tech community, for instance?
Well, interestingly, and it's hard to say that there are a lot of benefits from this pandemic, right? But if you could say that there was one, certainly a community like ours, Women in Tech around the world, has benefited from the fact that individuals are seeking a source of community. And so where you can find that right now is online. And where we offer a platform for individuals, like-minded individuals that are excited about technology, to want to come together, to continue to learn together, to support each other, to network with each other, well, we can offer that. And so what we have seen is that sort of hockey stick result in terms of the number of people. So we launched our chapter here in the Netherlands just a year ago at Elsevier's headquarters here in Amsterdam. And so obviously we started with 0. Today we have more than 2,200 members of the community. And
Amazing.
that number exponentially grew from about March until now. And so the majority of those have really joined us since the pandemic and having to be in a virtual only environment. And so the benefit in that sense has been we could offer a platform. We had some stability already to provide and offer good content, great speakers, and a lot of inspiration. And I think people were looking for that inspiration, that positivity, that, okay, we're all in this together, we're connected, to use your word, which I think is so important. You're absolutely right. We're cooperating and we're collaborating. And we can do that now through these online platforms. And we can continue to keep the conversation moving. And at the end of the day, to continue to work towards closing the gap for exciting more women and girls to choose for a course of study in technology or a career in technology.
Yeah, because you already mentioned it briefly just now. When the pandemic hit, we needed to adjust. We needed to quickly make new decisions or go into different pathways, choose different directions. We needed to disrupt our current system. I think disruption has been a topic that's been relevant within adaptability for a few years now. I mean, we've seen Uber, we've seen Booking.com, we've seen Takeaway really disrupting these very traditional systems. Adaptability, Nuon became Vattenfall, also to adjust to certain new market, new questions. So if we look at adaptability from the disruption side of things, where do you see it going? What's your gut feel about it?
Wow. Well, I think I work in a market where disruption is needed. And you mentioned that we went onto a new brand as Nuon. Well, it wasn't just a new brand. So we really had to change, where Nuon was a trusted brand in the Netherlands and we took care of our customers. Mm-hmm. And Vattenfall adopted 2 years ago, we adopted fossil-free within 1 generation, which has a huge change on the whole organization. It's unbelievable how it connects people, but it's really strange. You know, we sell energy. That's where we earn our money. And in fact, I have to say, don't buy our product. Save energy, which is a disruption in itself. Very interesting to work that way. Yeah.
And it's so important, isn't it, that companies learn how to disrupt themselves before they become disrupted by the market. And I think that at the same time, we have to recognize that while that disruption is happening and we can look towards even greater outcomes, there have been a number of inequalities that have been emerging because of this pandemic. Mm-hmm. And when I look through the lens of technology, there are a couple of categories that I think, I don't want this one crisis to lead to another one. So I think it's really important that we are looking at the categories that are being impacted in a very negative way, and considering what disruption is needed in order to ensure that they not only get back on track, but really make some leaps and bounds going forward. And I would look at perhaps even 3 different categories that I think are important to me, and indeed. So one is women, in terms of inequalities that we have seen, and you mentioned it at the start of the conversation too. So we see, women being at home, doing their own work at home and helping their children going through their education at home, and the additional roles that many women have had to take on top of their own work and their own daily job and taking care of their family and getting their kids through their educations. The stories that I'm sure we have all heard about many women having to suddenly learn how to be a math teacher and a language teacher and a gym teacher and everything else, right? And so that has, I think, presented an inequality, which has put a greater burden on women as a result. The other piece I would say is digital inclusion. And what I'm seeing right now emerging in terms of inequality is something I would call the digital divide, where there are communities and locations, even here in parts of Amsterdam, for instance, that may not have the connectivity to great Wi-Fi, to broadband, to the new 5G. that limits their ability to have every member of their household all online at the same time. And that's creating
we just
an
talked
inequality.
about it as well.
And not
Yeah.
only that, but I fear for certain consumers that they can't find their way anymore through organizations to services. One of the worries in my current job within Vattenfall is we're digitizing everything. But we have people with a disability not being able to use digital means or financial. They lack financial needs to buy new devices, to connect.
Right.
And what kind of responsibility do we take as a company in taking care of those people?
Yeah.
Can we get them, keep them connected?
Exactly. Those are indeed some of the areas that we see. So the lack of computing power. So you have the hardware and the software side.
Exactly.
So as a company like Vattenfall, how you look at offering or ensuring that your employees, and maybe even the children of those employees, all have a computer per person at home right now to help them through this time. Because that otherwise does create an inequality for the families that can afford to have one computer per person versus those that can't. And, and that happens also here in places like Amsterdam. We're not talking about necessarily in other countries or locations. And you touched also on accessibility, and indeed that's an area that I really believe is, we've all gone on to Zoom or using Microsoft Teams or using Amazon Chime and all the different tools that we have. Fantastic. And that absolutely has helped us to stay connected and more people using video conferencing. However, how many of those tools have screen-to-text undertitling that is available for an individual that may have a hearing impairment? Or like for myself, I have a visual impairment. And so looking at a screen all day long is exhausting for me, as it is for many people. I even hear, my boys talk about the fact that suddenly they were in a classroom and now they have to spend 8 hours behind a computer and they find that exhausting. I thought, well, welcome to my world. We're used to that. But so how have we helped individuals to have the right accommodations, but also to ensure that we're not creating a greater inequality because we all have to act the same now in the sense of getting online onto these video tools. How have we helped to facilitate that transformation into this video calling world that we all find ourselves in now?
And you said three areas for you. What's the third one?
Yeah, so it was women, and we changed subjects quite quickly, but as women, it was really the hardware and software, and it was persons with accessibility needs, so persons with impairments. I think these three categories is where we need to be particularly conscious that we're enabling people and not creating further disablement for individuals or inequalities for individuals in these areas. And I believe technology is a great enabler that can help women stay connected, help women with small businesses where we know that the majority of small businesses, particularly here in the Netherlands and in other countries around the world, are owned by women. However, they are also the businesses that have had the greatest impact because of the pandemic. And why? Because women have not had the skills to transition into a digital environment where suddenly they can sell and distribute their products online. And so they have lacked being able to make that conversion, make that transition themselves when they don't have individuals coming to their shops anymore. And now suddenly the rest of the world is all online. And we need to help these women have the right skills to move their businesses online. I think technology can be a great enabler there. Also through the hardware and the software and through accessibility. So I'd love to see Zoom, as an example. My challenge to them is please come back with, speech to text in your conferencing tools and make sure that is enabled for everyone. And these, I think, will be some good solutions for us to ensure that we don't create further crisis out of the current crisis we're in.
Yeah, I think with the three topics that you just mentioned upon, what you run into is a bias. I mean, we're not aware of stuff happening outside of our own bubble. What we talked about and why I jumped into you just now is we were talking about the fact that our government, the Dutch government, decided we're closing down the schools from Sunday to on Monday, not taking into consideration the fact that not every kid has their own laptop back at home and still needs to have a certain amount of hours in a day in education, while also their parents are working from home at the same time. Bias, we see something, we see more and more research and more results being published about the fact how that affects also our AI transformations. The soap dispensers that don't work on people with a darker colored skin because it's been tested on a reflection of white skin. Mm-hmm. Women not getting into the locker rooms because they're a doctor, and doctors are men. So when we see these biases and we needing to adapt and we needing to disrupt, do you have any ideas or thoughts on how we could do that? Because what I see happening in the last 3-4 years, the conversation has opened up. We are acknowledging more and more the fact that there is a bias in people in the world, which is very beneficial in ways that it helps us navigate the world. But when we're not conscious of them, there are, negative side effects. What's an action, or what are actions that we can take to, within that adaptability and within that disruption that we're in, and that also the pandemic has given us the sort of extra push to take action in that area. Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas? Or
well, the thing is, you talk about tech, and now bias becomes more visible, because bias have always been there.
Yeah.
Remember that all medicine tested not on women. Mm. So, why didn't you get healthy using the same medicine which was tested on a white male in his 30s? So hormones were totally left out of sight.
Still are a lot of times.
I feel that tech gives you the opportunity to really personalize. I think personalization will be the theme of the coming years. But the thing is, to get there, you start assembling loads of data. Mm-hmm. And what you see is that in our environment, you see that certain things come up more. We all know the example of Google. If you Google on a happy family, you see a white family. Father, mother, and 2 children.
True.
Why never 2 men or 2 women as parents? Why not black? White, yellow, whatever. Because it's built on data and available data. And apparently there are far more pictures, and even black people think of a white family. How can that be the case? So we need to invest way more in getting that data up to par, making sure that we have a really broad insight, and then personalize. Like, who are you? And what would you like? And how would you like to be addressed? I feel we're just, starting. And of course, we have the big tech companies who assemble loads of data. But how put them to use? And I feel there's still a lot of fear about assembling data, and what about my privacy? But I feel that if we're more open in sharing our data, we will get better service. We will get rid of bias, because I think now one of the main profits of tech is that we are aware of that bias. And before we just didn't know. Mm-hmm. It existed. Recently I looked on Netflix at Mad Men. Well, I don't know if you saw it, but let's talk about the 50s. And it was all under the surface. And I feel now it's open. We have the ability to make it more transparent. And now the next step, how to go about, how to work with that data, how to make sure we have equality in interpreting those things. But I feel we're still at the beginning.
Can you give a little example of what you just told us? Vattenfall, you're focusing on the 90-95%, but you're also leaving room for that 10-15% that's not part of the main public. Mm-hmm. What are you doing for that group right now?
I want to answer that question, but maybe another example, talking about bias, you probably are not aware. We quite recently started working with a tool to match our online texts The way you want to address, are we using simple language? But we also entered knowledge about gender-specific language. And that's really cool. Because talking about bias, those tools can really help get out that bias. Because we are a female-oriented company. Because our main buyers are female. So we worked on the text to being able to address those females more. Now we have that tool, and the tool scans every text we have online. And it gets out the bias quite easily. Bias on indeed simpleness, but more so gender specific. And
is that your tool, or is it?
No, it's a startup we work with.
Cool.
Textmetrics. They're a really cool company. And I was approached, in fact, rebranding Vattenfall. We wanted to have a different tone of voice. But we have so many content out there. So how to make sure that every content is more written in the way that we want to represent Vattenfall. So they approached me, and they used that tool, in fact, for recruitment. Getting people in, making sure that the female is addressed as well as the man. For companies that think, only men call.
So weird.
How is that possible? And they deep dived in the used vacancies, and then they saw a bias in text. So it's really cool what you can do with tech. And I feel the 10-15%. I feel 15%. Oh well, if I'm optimistic, 10%. Will have a hard time, if not, can't cope with digitalization, can't work with digital servicing. And within Vattenfall, we are very aware of that fact. And I always see it as my challenge to make our normal traffic and service traffic more efficient, being able to spend more budget on people who can't connect. Because they will always be there. What I feel is that a lot of my coworkers think, okay, it's the elderly. The elderly can't connect. That's not true. It's the people who don't have the financial means or don't have the education or indeed have a physical condition that makes it really hard to connect with us. And I feel that every company should save money to make sure that 100% of all the people you serve, making sure that they can connect to your service. And for me, it's a really personal challenge. I see, my husband has bad hearing, so I see the challenges in everyday life. How can we make sure that everyone, not only women, but everyone is included? And I think tech can play a huge role. Do you think the same, or?
I'm nodding my head the whole time and listening to your story. So I think, the whole story on data and bias, absolutely spot on. And we see that as well. And, and I think even going back to those job descriptions, as you mentioned, one of the efforts that I had recently gone through was in reviewing the job descriptions to ensure that we neutralize the tone and the text of how that job was described. So it didn't sound like, you had to be a sumo wrestler and, be running at things and, putting your shoulders into it. And whatever the text was that was not catering to anyone to want to apply in the first place. And I think even beyond the tech, there were human things we could do too to change, ensure that we had a 50-50 representation in the candidate pool. And that also, by the way, those that were evaluating the candidates had a 50-50 diverse representation.
Very important.
Of the candidates, so that at the end of the day, if we made this effort to be sure that we were equal in our candidates, that we didn't then have a non-representative group of managers that were hiring the individuals. I think these are really important. And, I would even take a step further back in terms of this topic of bias. Because you asked, what can we do? What needs to be done? And just to think about some of the data that we've seen. So the European Commission said that 500,000 roles in ICT were disappearing in about this time. So between the year 2021. And a challenge that we see is when you look at the university systems, particularly here, just take the Netherlands itself as far as data is concerned. 30% of the individuals that are graduating in higher education in technology are men. And here in the Netherlands, it's 7%. And so we're already off on the wrong foot when it comes to equal representation entering into the workforce.
So 7% are women?
Are women.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7% are women, 30% are men in higher education in technology in the Netherlands. Right. So if we're looking now at a deficit, so losing 500,000 jobs, and this was even data prior to the pandemic. Now I don't know yet what that data will tell us, but I fear it will be even a higher number in terms of roles and people that have been impacted. But one of the things that I think are really important to do is to have more role models available to women to excite them and encourage them to choose for technology. And this really starts at the age of about 14. We were talking a little bit earlier about leveraging creativity and leveraging the full empowerment of the feminine archetype that brings a balance into the workforce, not only in terms of being a great technologist, but also being a great person in business, and having those well-rounded skills that are both the hardcore technology capabilities and skills that you may need, as well as the human skills and learning how to be a great person in business. And so I think having a role model is vital for encouraging young girls at the age of 14. So at the age of 14, one thing we know is girls are the most creative at any point in time in their life at the age of 14. And by the way, at that age, they're also testing the same as boys in the STEM skills, so science, technology, engineering, and math. The scores are the same. But what's happening at that moment in time, while we're at this beautiful pivotal moment of great creativity, testing just fine on your scores, there's no one encouraging the girls to choose those tracks. So the teachers aren't necessarily encouraging girls. They're saying, maybe it would be better for you to just go towards the arts and humanities. Whereas boys are, attaboy, you go for it. We're all in for it. And look, girls aren't going to be persuaded by celebrities. They're unfortunately not always listening to their parents, and unfortunately not enough teachers are really encouraging them either. But there are women in technology, there are institutions in technology, and I think that women could do more to encourage younger girls to get excited about tech and to choose that course of study. Teachers can do the same, and really encouraging that. When I was 14, I made a choice to go towards electrical engineering, and I entered into a classroom where I was the only girl. But I was very fortunate to have a teacher who believed in every student in the class, and that included me. And so he taught me how to solder different colored wires together and to bind them onto a circuitry board and to attach a speaker. And suddenly I created a sound, and now I was hooked. So that was it. And so from 14 until today, I love technology and all that it can do. And we need more individuals that are willing to stimulate and excite girls at that age. The number of girls that I talk to that love Instagram or have an idea about wanting to sell their used clothing online. And okay, well, build an app. What would you think about working at a company like an Instagram? Oh, that would be cool. Well, then you'd be working at a tech company. Yeah. No, that's not possible. Well, yes, it is possible.
Exactly. You talk about role models, ideas, but it's also examples.
Yes.
Because the idea of tech is like a sweaty guy working with technical setups and no connection. But I think you say something really important, and that's connected to the creativity. I feel that we will need a lot of creativity to make sure we can keep up with the challenges the world is giving us. Yeah. So we need be able to work out solutions, and tech is a really big part. Yeah. And I feel sometimes we address tech as we did earlier, like, okay, so you choose languages or you choose physics or math. where what you see is that it all is growing together. And we had some fun because you have a technical background. I come from a really creative background. And we had a sort of similar setup of our career. And I think the connection there, if you can make that connection when children are in their early teens, 14, 15, and they actually can see, okay, how can I use these skills in order to do that?
Yeah.
I feel that is so important. And I really pushed my eldest, which is a daughter, to make full use of her skills. And that age, we just visited certain companies. And how are they working and what do they do? Because for girls, it's really important to show the end product. Not so much a process, but what will it end up like? And I feel it's really important to tap into that creativity skills, creative skills, in order to make the connection to tech. Really important.
I agree, and I think the girls want to be a part of creating the solution, right? So that creativity is absolutely needed to solve some of the world's most complex problems that we're facing. And so if there's not a field that could embrace the creativity as technology, I don't know what else, but it's so important. And girls want to see how they can be a part of that process. Because then they have a connection, they have a link, they have a ping, they have an idea. And then suddenly, before they have the end product, and they want to see how that process is evolving with their creative thoughts. And it's vital to embrace that and to continue to perpetuate it throughout their lives, and starting at a young age, to say, this is that gene that you have that you specialize in, which is fantastic. And I think ultimately is so needed in technology. And, look, at the end of the day, when we can have a representation which is more equal, and we talked about bias, we talked about AI, so we want to have diversity in technology, and we want to have diversity not only in roles in technology, but in the outcomes and in the solutions that we're developing in technology. They need to represent the needs of our society. And our society is not just one type of person. Our society is a blend. And it's so important that what we're putting into, what we're training the machines, what we're training the computers to be able to do the analytics, to do the artificial intelligence and the deep learning and the analytics, needs to be lacking bias, and it needs to be diverse and representing the thoughts and the ideas and the needs of all people in society.
Yeah, so if I can round it up, I mean, we started with the age of adaptability. We went into disruption. Then we came to inclusion, education. And if we can take that next step and be aware of that and have that as an integrated part of our next steps forward, we're able to disrupt and then adapt. Is that a full circle that we can make?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jorissa, Cara, for being here with me today. And that was it for this episode. And make sure to tune in to the next one.